Sometimes the smallest thing a person loses is the thing that exposes the biggest secret of all. Claire Bennett tightened her grip on her 4-year-old son's hand as they hurried through Terminal B of Chicago O'Hare Airport, weaving through exhausted travelers dragging rolling suitcases across the polished floor. Noah's tiny sneakers squeaked with every rushed step he took beside her, while she kept glancing at the giant departure screen hanging overhead. Their flight to Phoenix was boarding in less than 12 minutes, and Claire already knew they were cutting it dangerously close. A strand of blonde hair slipped loose from her messy ponytail as she adjusted the worn diaper bag hanging from her shoulder. She looked like someone who hadn't slept a full night in years. Because she hadn't. "Mommy, Bunny's tired too," Noah whispered, clutching a faded stuffed rabbit against his chest. Claire forced a smile even though anxiety twisted inside her stomach. "We're almost there, baby." The problem was she barely had enough money for the ticket in the first place. The extra baggage fee at check-in had wiped out nearly everything left in her bank account, and the humiliation still burned across her cheeks. She could still hear the airline employee speaking louder than necessary, while people behind her in line stared impatiently. "Ma'am, if you can't pay the additional $72, the suitcase cannot go through." Claire had stood there frozen for several seconds before pulling crumpled bills from different pockets inside her purse, while Noah watched quietly beside her. Every dollar felt painfully visible. Every person in line looked annoyed that she existed. She hated moments like that, hated looking poor in public. Now, as she rushed through the crowded terminal, she kept replaying it in her mind while Noah struggled to keep up. "Mommy, slow down," he said softly. Claire immediately stopped and crouched beside him. Her exhaustion faded the second she looked into his blue eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. My fault." She kissed the top of his head and stood again, taking his hand carefully. Around them, business travelers moved quickly in tailored suits while airport announcements echoed overhead. Somewhere nearby, a baby cried. A coffee cup dropped. Rolling luggage rattled endlessly across the floor. The entire airport felt loud, impatient, and cold. Then it happened. Noah suddenly gasped. Claire turned just in time to see the stuffed rabbit slip from his small hands and tumble onto the moving walkway behind them. Before she could grab it, a passing suitcase knocked the toy sideways, sending it sliding beneath a crowded row of seats near the VIP lounge entrance. Noah's face immediately crumpled. "Bunny," he screamed. Claire spun around fast, nearly losing balance as people brushed past her without stopping. "Wait here," she said quickly, panic rising in her chest. But Noah was already crying hard enough for nearby travelers to stare. Claire dropped to her knees beside the seats, reaching desperately under them while dust clung to her sleeves. Come on," she muttered under her breath. Someone bumped her shoulder. Another person sighed loudly as they walked around her. Noah's crying only grew louder. And then the overhead announcement came. "Final boarding call for Flight 281 to Phoenix." Claire froze. Her heart dropped. She still couldn't reach the toy. She could barely breathe. Because in that moment, she knew she was about to lose either the rabbit her son couldn't sleep without, or the flight she could barely afford to miss. Claire reached farther beneath the row of airport seats, her fingers brushing against cold metal and discarded napkins while Noah cried behind her loud enough to turn heads across the terminal. "Mommy, Bunny is scared," he sobbed, wiping tears across his cheeks with the sleeve of his tiny sweatshirt. Claire swallowed hard and forced calm into her voice even though panic clawed through her chest. "I know, baby. I almost have it." But she did not. The stuffed rabbit had slid deeper beneath the seats near the private lounge entrance where polished glass walls separated wealthy travelers from the chaos outside. People in expensive coats stepped around her without slowing down while the final boarding announcement echoed once again overhead. Every second felt heavier. Then a polished black dress, shoe, stopped directly beside the toy. Claire looked up instinctively, expecting another annoyed traveler. Instead, she saw a tall man in a dark charcoal overcoat standing perfectly still near the edge of the lounge entrance. He looked like the kind of man airports bent themselves around. Calm, sharp, untouchable. His silver watch probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent. An airport employee hurried toward him immediately. "Mr. Cole, your car service is already waiting once you land in Seattle." The man barely acknowledged him. His attention had shifted downward toward the stuffed rabbit lying near his feet. Claire quickly stood up, embarrassed to still be kneeling on the floor in front of strangers. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "That belongs to my son." The man bent down without speaking and picked up the rabbit carefully by one ear. Noah immediately reached toward it. "Bunny." But before handing it back, the man noticed something stitched into the toy's faded fabric. A small white tag hidden beneath one of the rabbit's arms. His eyes settled on the embroidered words for only a second. Then his entire expression changed. Completely. His hand tightened slightly around the toy. The movement was subtle, but Claire noticed it instantly. The color drained from his face as though someone had pulled the air from his lungs. The airport noise seemed to disappear around him. "Sir?" The employee beside him asked cautiously. The man did not answer. He kept staring at the stitched handwriting on the tag like he had seen a ghost standing in front of him. Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Are you okay?" she asked. He slowly looked up at her for the first time. His blue eyes seemed distant, almost disoriented, and for several strange seconds he said nothing at all. Then his gaze moved to Noah. The little boy had stopped crying now, watching the stranger quietly while clutching Claire's leg. Something unreadable flickered across the man's face. Not anger, not confusion, something deeper, something almost painful. Finally, he crouched down and handed the rabbit back to Noah with unexpected gentleness. "Here you go, buddy." Noah hugged the toy tightly against his chest. "Thank you." The man nodded once, but his attention drifted back toward the tag again as if he could not stop thinking about it. Claire instinctively adjusted the strap of her worn bag on her shoulder. She suddenly felt painfully aware of every difference between herself and the man standing in front of her. His tailored coat, her thrift store sneakers, his calm silence, her constant exhaustion. Another boarding announcement interrupted the moment. Claire's eyes widened. "Oh no." She grabbed Noah's hand immediately. "We have to run." She turned quickly toward the gate, but after only a few steps, she heard the man's voice behind her for the first time. Low, controlled, but shaken underneath. "Wait." Claire stopped and looked back. The man stared directly at her now, his jaw tensed like he was trying to hold something inside. "Where did you get that rabbit?" he asked quietly. Claire tightened her grip on Noah's hand as she turned back toward the stranger. Around them, travelers continued rushing through the terminal without noticing the strange silence that had settled between them. The man still stood near the VIP lounge entrance, his eyes fixed on the stuffed rabbit now tucked safely against Noah's chest. Claire hesitated for a second before answering. "It belonged to my cousin," she said carefully. Something in the man's face shifted again at those words. His expression remained controlled, but Claire noticed the tension in his jaw immediately. "Your cousin?" he repeated quietly. She nodded once. She gave it to Noah before she passed away. The man stared at her without blinking. Even the airport employee standing beside him looked uncomfortable now, like he could sense something personal unfolding. Claire glanced nervously toward the departure gate again. She could not afford to miss this flight. Not after everything it had cost her just to get here. "Look, I really need to go," she said softly. But the man spoke again before she could turn away. "What was your cousin's name?" Claire frowned slightly. The question felt strange coming from a complete stranger. "Lily," she answered slowly. "Lily Harper." The reaction was immediate. The man's breath caught so subtly most people would not have noticed it. But Claire did. His eyes closed for half a second like the name itself physically hurt him. Then he looked down at Noah again. The little boy was quietly rubbing the rabbit's worn ear against his cheek, completely unaware of the tension surrounding him. "Mr. Cole," the airport employee interrupted cautiously. "Your flight leaves in 30 minutes. Ethan Cole ignored him completely. Claire finally recognized the name now. Ethan Cole, the billionaire tech executive whose face occasionally appeared on magazine covers in grocery store checkout lines. She had seen articles about him before while waiting tables during slow afternoon shifts. Young CEO, self-made millionaire, cold genius. None of those articles had mentioned the look currently sitting in his eyes, because it was not confidence. It looked more like grief. "How did Lily die?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire's chest tightened. People usually avoided asking that question directly. "Car accident," she answered after a pause. "About 3 years ago." Ethan lowered his gaze slowly. His fingers flexed once at his side like he was grounding himself. Claire suddenly noticed how pale he looked now compared to moments earlier. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Noah tugged gently on Claire's sleeve. "Mommy," he whispered, "are we missing the airplane?" Claire looked toward the gate, and panic rushed back instantly. Oh my God! She bent down quickly toward Noah. Come on, baby. But before she could leave again, Ethan spoke in a quieter voice than before. The tag. Claire stopped. Ethan swallowed once before continuing. The stitching on the rabbit. His eyes lifted toward her carefully. Lily made that herself, did she not? Claire's stomach tightened. How do you know that? Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the rabbit with an expression Claire could not fully understand. Like he was staring at a memory instead of a toy. Then he finally said something that made the air leave Claire's lungs completely. Because I bought that rabbit for her 8 years ago. Claire froze. Every sound in the airport seemed distant suddenly. Noah looked back and forth between them innocently while hugging the toy tighter against his chest. Ethan's eyes remained locked on the rabbit. Lily used to sew names into everything she loved. He said quietly, almost to himself. Backpacks, jackets, Christmas stockings. His voice grew softer. She said names made people feel like they belonged somewhere. Claire felt chills spread across her arms. Because the way he said Lily's name did not sound casual. It sounded personal, deeply personal. And for the first time since this strange encounter began, Claire started to realize this was not random at all. Claire could not stop staring at Ethan Cole after that. The airport noise slowly returned around them, but everything suddenly felt distant and unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life for a moment. Noah tugged gently on her sleeve again. Mommy, are we in trouble? Claire immediately crouched beside him and brushed his blonde hair back carefully. No, sweetheart. Everything is okay. But her voice sounded less convincing than she wanted. Ethan remained standing a few feet away, silent now, though his eyes kept drifting back toward Noah with growing intensity. Claire noticed it immediately, the way he studied the child's face, the way his expression tightened each time Noah looked up at him. It was subtle, but impossible to miss once she saw it. We really have to go, Claire said softly as she stood again. Ethan nodded once, though he still looked distracted by thoughts he could not seem to control. What is his name? He asked. Noah, Claire answered cautiously. Ethan repeated the name quietly under his breath, almost like he was testing how it sounded aloud. Noah looked up at him curiously while holding the stuffed rabbit close against his chest. Are you rich? Noah suddenly asked. Claire's face immediately flushed with embarrassment. Noah. But Ethan surprised her by giving the faintest smile. It was small and brief, yet it completely changed his face for a second. Some people think so, he answered calmly. Noah considered that seriously. You smell expensive. Claire nearly stopped breathing. Oh my God. She covered part of her face in humiliation while Ethan actually let out a quiet laugh under his breath. It sounded unfamiliar coming from him, like something he rarely did. Noah pointed toward Ethan's watch innocently. My mommy says watches like that cost more than cars. Claire wanted the floor to open beneath her. Okay, we are leaving now. But Ethan still seemed strangely interested instead of offended. His attention returned to Noah again, lingering longer this time. Claire noticed it immediately. The similarity was impossible to fully explain, but suddenly she could see why Ethan looked unsettled. The same blue eyes. The same focused stare. Even the slight tilt of Noah's head looked oddly familiar now standing this close to Ethan. The realization made Claire uncomfortable for reasons she could not explain. Ethan seemed to notice it too because his expression slowly darkened with emotion he was trying hard to suppress. How old is he? He asked carefully. 4, Claire answered. Ethan's eyes lowered slightly as though he was silently calculating something in his head. The tension in his jaw returned instantly. Before Claire could ask another question, a gate agent's voice echoed sharply across the terminal. Final boarding for flight 281 to Phoenix. Gate closes in 2 minutes. Claire's heart dropped. No. She grabbed Noah's hand quickly and turned toward the gate. Come on, baby, run. They barely made it 10 feet before an airline employee stepped directly into their path. I am sorry, ma'am. Boarding is closed. Claire froze completely. Please, she said immediately, breathless from rushing. Please do not do this. We were right there. The employee gave her the practiced expression of someone already used to disappointed travelers. The aircraft door has already been secured. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Please, I cannot afford another ticket. Nearby travelers slowed down just enough to watch before continuing on. Claire felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise into her chest again. Noah squeezed her hand quietly, sensing her panic. Mommy. The employee lowered his voice slightly. I am sorry. Claire closed her eyes for one painful second, trying not to cry in front of strangers. She had spent nearly 3 months saving for this trip to Phoenix. The interview. The apartment opportunity. The chance to finally start over somewhere cheaper. And now it was gone. Completely gone. Then a calm voice spoke behind her. Reopen the gate. Claire turned immediately. Ethan stood several feet away, his expression composed again, but there was something unmovable in his tone now. The airline employee blinked in surprise. Sir, we cannot reopen boarding once. You can't. Ethan interrupted quietly. And you will. The airline employee straightened immediately after hearing Ethan's voice, his entire posture changing in seconds. Mr. Cole, I apologize, but FAA procedure. I am aware of the procedure, Ethan said calmly. Reopen the gate. His tone never rose, yet the authority behind it silenced the conversation instantly. The employee hesitated only a second longer before speaking into his headset. Claire stood frozen beside Noah, completely overwhelmed by how quickly the situation had changed. Travelers nearby slowed subtly again, recognizing Ethan now. A few whispered quietly to each other while pretending not to stare. Claire hated attention like this. She shifted uncomfortably and tightened her grip on Noah's hand. You do not have to do this, she said softly toward Ethan. He looked at her for a moment before answering. I know. The simplicity of the response unsettled her more than arrogance would have. Within another minute, the gate door reopened. You may board now, ma'am, the employee said politely. Claire blinked in disbelief. Seriously? Yes, ma'am. Noah's face lit up immediately. Mommy, the airplane waited for us. Claire let out a shaky breath and crouched beside him quickly. Looks like it did. Then she stood again and turned toward Ethan. For a second, she struggled to find words. Nobody had helped her like this in a very long time. Thank you, she finally said quietly. Ethan gave a small nod, though his attention drifted back toward Noah almost immediately afterward. That same strange look returned to his eyes again, like he was searching for something he could not fully understand. Claire noticed it once more, and discomfort settled deeper into her chest. We should go, she said gently to Noah. But before they stepped away, Noah suddenly looked up at Ethan again. Do you have kids? The question caught Claire completely off guard. Noah. But Ethan did not seem bothered. In fact, the question appeared to affect him more than it should have. His expression tightened subtly before he answered. No, he said after a pause. I do not. Noah tilted his head thoughtfully. You would probably be good at it. Ethan stared at the little boy in complete silence. Claire could almost feel something shifting beneath the surface of him now. Something fragile. Then Noah held up the stuffed rabbit proudly. Bunny likes you too. Ethan looked down at the worn rabbit again, and for the briefest second, emotion flickered openly across his face before he forced it away. That is good to know, he said quietly. Another boarding announcement sounded overhead, reminding Claire they needed to move. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and nodded politely toward Ethan. Thank you again. Then she and Noah finally started toward the gate. But halfway down the boarding tunnel, Claire glanced back instinctively. Ethan was still standing exactly where they left him, watching them, not casually, not out of curiosity. He looked completely unable to look away. The sight sent an uneasy feeling through her stomach. Inside the aircraft, Claire settled Noah into their seats near the back of the plane while passengers continued boarding around them. Noah immediately pressed his face toward the window, completely recovered from the earlier meltdown. Children moved on quickly. Adults did not. Claire sat quietly beside him, replaying the entire encounter in her head while fastening her seatbelt. Something about Ethan's reaction to Lily's name felt deeply personal. Too personal. And the way he looked at Noah had not felt random either. She pulled the rabbit gently into her lap and examined the stitch tag again. The faded thread still read exactly the same. For Noah. Love, Lily. Claire remembered watching Lily sew it years ago while smiling quietly to herself late at night. At the time, Claire had been too young to understand why Lily cried afterward when she thought nobody was watching. Suddenly, a memory surfaced that Claire had not thought about in years. Lily standing by the apartment window one rainy night, staring down at the street with red eyes while holding this exact rabbit in her hands. Sometimes people lose each other because somebody else decides they should, Lily had whispered softly back then. Claire never understood what she meant. Until now. And somewhere beyond the airplane window, Ethan Cole still stood inside the terminal, staring toward the aircraft with a look that no longer resembled curiosity at all. The plane finally lifted into the cloudy evening sky nearly 40 minutes late, but Claire barely noticed the movement anymore. Noah had fallen asleep beside her with the stuffed rabbit tucked beneath his chin while soft engine noise filled the cabin. Most passengers had settled into silence, glowing phone screens flickering faintly in the dimmed lights overhead. Claire leaned back carefully in her seat, exhausted down to her bones, but her mind refused to rest. She kept thinking about Ethan Cole's face when he saw Lily's name. Nobody reacted like that unless they had loved someone deeply. Claire glanced down at Noah sleeping peacefully beside her and felt uneasiness settle heavier inside her chest. Lily had always avoided talking about Noah's father. Every time Claire asked questions years ago, Lily would smile sadly and change the subject. At the time, Claire assumed the man simply abandoned her. That story made sense. Men left all the time, especially rich men. But now she was no longer sure. The memory of Ethan standing motionless in the terminal replayed again in her head. The shock in his eyes had looked genuine, painfully genuine. Claire rubbed her forehead slowly and stared out the airplane window into darkness. For years earlier, after Lily died, Claire had found herself suddenly raising Noah alone at 24 years old with no money, no support, and no idea what she was doing. The easiest option would have been placing him into foster care. Several people quietly suggested it. Claire ignored every one of them. Because the first time Noah wrapped his tiny fingers around hers at the hospital, something inside her changed permanently. Since then, life had become survival. Double shifts, cheap apartments, overdue bills, constant exhaustion. Yet somehow, Noah still laughed every single day. That mattered more than anything. Beside her, Noah shifted slightly in his sleep and tightened his arms around the rabbit. The movement caused something small to slip partially from a hidden opening near the toy stitching. Claire frowned immediately. She carefully lifted the rabbit closer under the reading light and noticed a folded piece of paper barely visible inside the worn fabric seam. Her stomach tightened. She had washed this rabbit dozens of times over the years and never noticed anything hidden inside it before. Slowly, trying not to wake Noah, she pulled the paper free. It was old, soft at the edges from time, folded several times over. Claire stared at it with growing confusion before carefully unfolding it in her lap. The moment she saw Lily's handwriting, her pulse quickened instantly. Claire had not seen that handwriting in years. Her hands trembled slightly as she began reading. If you are reading this, then somehow the truth finally found its way back to where it belonged. Claire's breath caught. She looked down at Noah instinctively before continuing. I tried to tell Ethan about the baby. I swear I tried. But his father made certain I never reached him. He told me I would destroy Ethan's future if I stayed. He offered money for me to disappear. When I refused, everything became impossible. Claire stared at the page in shock while the airplane engines hummed around her. Her heartbeat pounded louder with every line. Ethan never stopped loving me, and that is what made leaving hurt the most. If Noah ever meets him one day, tell Ethan I never lied to him. Not once. Claire's eyes widened slowly. She looked back toward sleeping Noah again, suddenly feeling like the air inside the cabin had disappeared. Her gaze drifted toward the final line written shakily near the bottom of the page. Noah deserves to know his father loved him before he was even born. Claire covered her mouth instantly, emotion crashing into her chest all at once. For several seconds, she could not move at all. Then she slowly lowered the letter into her lap and stared blankly ahead. Because somewhere back in Chicago, a man who believed he had no children had just looked directly into his son's eyes without knowing the full truth yet. Claire barely slept during the rest of the flight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan Cole standing frozen inside the airport terminal with that shattered expression on his face. By the time the plane landed in Phoenix just after midnight, exhaustion pressed heavily against her shoulders, but her thoughts refused to quiet down. Noah rubbed his eyes sleepily as passengers began standing and pulling bags from overhead compartments. Are we home now? He asked softly. Claire forced a small smile while helping him into his jacket. Not yet, sweetheart, but we are getting close. The truth was, she had no idea where home even was anymore. The apartment opportunity in Phoenix was temporary at best, and the restaurant interview she traveled for was only part-time work. Still, it was something, more than she had back in Chicago. As they walked through the airport terminal together, Claire kept Lily's letter hidden carefully inside her purse like it might disappear if she let go of it for even a second. Her chest still tightened every time she remembered the words written across the page. Ethan never stopped loving me. By the time Claire and Noah finally reached the small extended-stay motel on the edge of the city, it was nearly 1 in the morning. The room smelled faintly like old carpet and industrial cleaner, but Noah did not care. He climbed onto the bed immediately with the stuffed rabbit tucked beneath his arm. "Can we get pancakes tomorrow?" he asked sleepily. Claire brushed his hair back gently. "Maybe." Noah looked up at her carefully. "You say maybe when you mean no." Despite everything weighing on her heart, Claire almost smiled. "Go to sleep, little detective." Within minutes, Noah drifted off completely. Claire sat alone beside the dim motel lamp afterward, pulling Lily's letter back out with trembling hands. She read every line again slower this time. The pain in Lily's words felt almost alive on the page. Claire suddenly remembered all the nights Lily sat quietly by the apartment window years ago after Noah was born. The way she checked her phone constantly, even though nobody ever called. The way she whispered Ethan's name sometimes when she thought nobody could hear her. Claire had mistaken heartbreak for abandonment back then. Now she realized Lily had been grieving someone she never stopped loving. A sudden knock at the motel door startled her badly. Claire froze instantly. Nobody should have known they were here. Carefully, she stood and looked through the peephole. Her breath caught immediately. Ethan Cole stood outside the room alone, wearing the same dark coat from the airport, though now he looked exhausted too. Claire opened the door slowly in shock. "How did you find us?" Ethan lowered his eyes briefly before answering. "The airline gave me your hotel information after I explained the situation." Claire stared at him in disbelief. "That does not sound legal." "Probably not," he admitted quietly. Neither of them moved for a second. Then Ethan's eyes shifted past her toward sleeping Noah on the bed inside the room. Claire noticed how his entire expression softened instantly at the sight. It happened naturally, uncontrollably, like something inside him already recognized the child before his mind fully accepted it. "I read the letter," Claire said softly. Ethan looked back at her immediately. She reached slowly into her purse and pulled out the folded paper. The moment Ethan recognized Lily's handwriting, the color drained from his face again. Claire held the letter tightly between trembling fingers. "She tried to tell you," Claire whispered. Ethan stared at the paper without speaking. "Your father stopped her." Silence filled the motel room completely. Noah shifted slightly in his sleep behind them, while distant traffic hummed outside beyond the curtains. Ethan finally took the letter slowly from Claire's hand. His fingers shook the moment he touched it. Claire watched his eyes move across Lily's words line by line. Halfway through reading, Ethan suddenly stopped breathing for a second. His shoulders tightened sharply as emotion hit him all at once. Then he lowered the letter slowly, staring at the floor like the world beneath him had just disappeared. When he finally looked toward Noah sleeping peacefully on the bed, there were tears standing openly in his eyes. Claire had never seen a man like Ethan Cole look broken before. Not in real life. People like him always appeared controlled on television interviews and magazine covers. Perfect posture, calm voice, expensive confidence. But standing inside that small motel room under weak yellow light, Ethan looked nothing like the powerful billionaire the world knew. He looked like someone trying to survive the weight of losing years he could never get back. He lowered himself slowly into the chair near the window, without taking his eyes off Noah sleeping on the bed. The letter remained clenched carefully in his hand. Claire stood near the door quietly, unsure what to say now that the truth finally existed between them. Ethan swallowed hard before speaking. She was pregnant when she disappeared. His voice sounded hollow. Claire nodded once. She found out a few weeks after she left New York. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, like the words physically hurt him. "I searched for her." Claire looked at him carefully. "What?" Ethan stared down at the letter in silence for several seconds before continuing. "After Lily vanished, I hired investigators. I checked hospitals, apartments, old friends." He laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. "My father told me she left because she wanted money and attention. He said she was using me." Claire's chest tightened painfully. "That is not true. I know that now." Ethan looked toward Noah again, and Claire saw tears gather in his eyes once more before he forced them away. But back then, his voice faltered quietly. I was stupid enough to believe part of it. The honesty in his words surprised Claire. Most wealthy men she had met blamed everyone except themselves. Ethan did not. He looked devastated by his own failures. Claire sat carefully on the edge of the second bed across from him. Lily never stopped loving you, she said softly. Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. Then why did she never contact me? Claire hesitated before answering. Because she was scared. Ethan looked at her slowly. Your father's lawyers showed up after Noah was born. They offered her money again. Ethan froze completely. Claire continued quietly. They told her if she came near you, they would ruin her financially. They said she would destroy your company before it even launched. Ethan stared at her in stunned silence. She thought you knew? Claire nodded sadly. At first, she glanced down at the rabbit resting beside Noah. But eventually she realized you probably did not. Ethan covered his mouth briefly with one hand as emotion overwhelmed him again. The room fell silent except for the hum of the old air conditioner near the window. Then Noah stirred slightly in his sleep. Mommy, he mumbled weakly. Claire immediately stood and walked over beside him. I am here, sweetheart. Noah blinked sleepily before noticing Ethan sitting across the room. His tired little face brightened slightly. Rich guy. Claire nearly laughed despite everything. Ethan looked startled for half a second before a small smile finally appeared through his grief. Hey, buddy. Noah rubbed one eye sleepily while holding the rabbit close. Did you follow us? Ethan looked toward Claire briefly before answering honestly. Yeah, I guess I did. Noah seemed perfectly fine with that explanation. Children accepted strange things more easily than adults. Okay, he whispered before settling deeper into the pillow again. But then he looked back toward Ethan one more time. You look sad. Ethan's expression cracked instantly. Claire saw it happen in real time. Years of control suddenly failing beneath one simple sentence from a child. Ethan lowered his head briefly while trying to steady his breathing. I am, he admitted quietly. Noah studied him with sleepy seriousness before lifting the stuffed rabbit toward him slightly. Bunny helps. Ethan stared at the toy for several seconds before carefully taking it into his hands. The stitch tag brushed against his fingers again. For Noah. Love, Lily. His shoulders finally gave way under the emotion he had been fighting since Chicago. Ethan bowed his head as tears slipped silently down his face for the first time in years while the son he never knew existed watched him with quiet, innocent concern from the motel bed. By sunrise, the small motel room felt different somehow. Softer, quieter, the kind of silence that comes after a storm finally passes. Claire woke slowly in the early morning light spilling through the curtains and immediately froze for a second when she saw Ethan still sitting in the same chair near the window. He had not slept at all. His dark coat rested folded over the back of the chair, while Lily's letter remained carefully held in one hand, like something fragile enough to disappear. Across the room, Noah still slept peacefully beneath the thin motel blanket with the stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm again. Ethan was watching him with an expression Claire could barely describe. Not disbelief anymore. Not confusion. Something deeper now. Something permanent. Claire sat up quietly and rubbed her eyes. You stayed. Ethan looked toward her calmly. I could not leave. There was no arrogance in his voice now. No distance. Just honesty. Claire stood slowly and walked toward the small coffee maker near the counter. The coffee here is terrible, she said softly. Ethan gave the faintest smile. I have had worse. Claire glanced at him over her shoulder. That sounds impossible. For the first time since they met, Ethan actually looked almost human when he smiled slightly again. Tired. Broken. But real. A few minutes later, Noah woke up and immediately sat upright when he saw Ethan still there. You came back. Ethan nodded once. I did. Noah seemed completely satisfied by that answer. He climbed off the bed with messy hair and carried the rabbit over toward Ethan without hesitation. Mommy says people leave all the time, Noah announced sleepily. Claire nearly choked on her coffee. Noah. But Ethan looked devastated by the innocent statement instead of offended. He slowly crouched down in front of the little boy. Some people do, he admitted quietly. But some people stay too. Noah studied him carefully with serious 4-year-old concentration. Are you staying? Claire held her breath without realizing it. Ethan looked directly at Noah for several long seconds before answering. If it is okay with you, he said softly, I would like to. Noah considered this deeply for about 2 seconds before nodding. Okay. Ethan laughed quietly under his breath, overwhelmed emotion flickering across his face again. Then Noah reached out and grabbed Ethan's hand naturally like he had known him forever. Claire looked away for a second because suddenly her eyes burned unexpectedly. She had spent 4 years carrying every burden alone. Every fever, every bill, every nightmare, every fear about the future. Watching someone else hold Noah's hand so naturally felt almost unreal. Ethan looked up toward Claire then, understanding something unspoken passing silently between them. "You kept him safe," he said quietly. Claire swallowed hard. "I tried." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, you did." The sincerity in his voice hit harder than she expected. Nobody had ever acknowledged how hard the last few years had been. Nobody. Noah suddenly tugged Ethan toward the motel window excitedly. "Look, airplanes." Ethan stood beside him while the two of them watched a plane cross the bright Arizona sky in the distance. The morning sunlight spilled across Noah's blonde hair while Ethan stood beside his son in silence, still looking overwhelmed that this little boy was real. Truly real. Claire watched them quietly from across the room, and for the first time in years, the tightness in her chest eased slightly. Not completely. Life would still be complicated after this. Painful conversations would come. Lawyers. Truths. Regrets. But somehow, despite all of it, the future no longer felt quite so heavy. Noah leaned sleepily against Ethan's side while holding the stuffed rabbit between them. Ethan instinctively rested one hand gently against the child's back like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then Noah looked up at him and smiled. And Ethan Cole, the man who once believed he had lost the love of his life forever, stood quietly in the morning light realizing that Lily had still found a way to bring him home to his son after all.